Welcome to the Crypto on the Block radio show, featuring industry pioneers and CEOs across various industries in blockchain and cryptocurrency. Here's your host, Matthew Loughran.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another show of Crypto on the Block. Again, your host, Matthew Loughran. Today, we have a fabulous show for you. We have Mr. Shane Brett from Gecko Governance. Shane is the CEO of Gecko Governance, which is a Reg-Tech company using blockchain in the compliance and governance space. Shane, welcome.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for coming on the show today. Obviously, I hear the accent, so if you just want to maybe let people know where you're calling in from today.
I'm calling in from Ireland, as you can probably tell.
Love it. So first off, Shane, can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourself as well as Gecko Governance?
Absolutely. So my background is in the hedge fund industry. So in that whole area of asset management and, and pension funds. And I spent about 20 years working all around the world in London and Australia, over in the US and here in Ireland, managing compliance and regulation for a lot of different asset managers and hedge funds. And in that space, I would have written a couple of books and lots of articles. And I ended up, after the financial crisis, there was a lot of new regulation out, that was coming in after 2008. So I set up a consultancy in London to help manage compliance for big fund managers. And all that time, I was always trying to find an easy-to-use kind of regulation technology product. Long before the name Reg-Tech was invented, but it was really just around making it easy for fund companies to comply with lots of new regulation. So I couldn't find it, moved back to Ireland about 4 years ago, and then basically decided to build it. And that's what our first product, Gecko Governance, was all about. It was about making it easy for compliance and for fund managers to manage all the regulation they had in place. And one thing we did that was really interesting was that as we were looking at the market, we realized that a really good way for fund companies and financial companies to prove they were compliant to a regulator like the SEC or any investor was to use a blockchain to basically manage all their compliance and all their processes and timestamp it with that irreversible audit trail of compliance that basically proves that you followed a particular process for maybe completing your anti-money laundering or your investor checks or your compliance reporting. So that's something we did over the last couple of years, and we worked really closely with Hyperledger, which is the really great blockchain consortium. And we only realized after doing this for about 6 months, Matthew, that nobody else in the industry had taken a product for financial regulation and linked it into a blockchain. So we were kind of the first in that area, and that's been really exciting. And now what we're looking to do is really take that existing model, which again is making it easy for fund managers to comply with their regulation and using blockchain to assist that, and now look at other industries that need the same level, high level of governance in place. And for us, the obvious one was really the crypto and particularly the ICO space as well.
Wow, okay, that's quite interesting, right? So you're taking the model that you already have built out, and specifically in the financial services sectors, where what it sounds like is obviously you have a high level of regulation sitting in that sector, and then from that point you're now branching out into other avenues.
Exactly that. And it was all driven by, we have a venture capital backer, our VC company is a brilliant organization called Cosmo Ventures over in Boston. And they are they're very exposed and also heavily invested in the crypto and ICO space. And it was actually those guys who gave us the idea last summer. They said, we're building out these new tokenized funds and ICO projects and new cryptocurrency projects, but we can't find it. We can find plenty of solutions in the market to do like AML checks on crypto investors, which I'm sure we've all been through, but we can't find anything in the market to do compliance and governance checks on ICO projects. And, that's where a lot of the scams are and a lot of the issues that we see every day in the press. So they say, guys, you have an existing product that does probably, 70% of this right now to a very high level of quality for the funds industry. It would make sense for you to bring out a new product that gives that same, what I would call enterprise or, a large company version of compliance for the first time to the ICO and crypto space. So that's what we've been launching over the last few months, and that's our new project, which is called Gecko Crypto One.
So that was going to be a question of mine, right? It's really thinking about kind of what gap in the market that Gecko is looking to fill. Now, from what I can tell here, so obviously there's plenty of solutions, as we know, for your KYC and AML checks on the investor side, but this really comes in at the company level. So as you said, right? If the client is maybe an investment fund looking at different ICO projects, and they can again leverage Gecko for the compliance checks and the governance checks on the actual companies. Is that kind of how that's set up? Is that correct?
Exactly. So if you can think of it, that's a very good way to put it. So if you can think, you're a crypto investment fund, and you have invested in 10 ICOs, and maybe you're looking and thinking about maybe another 20 that you think might be a good future investment opportunity. But what's missing right now is a standard, what I would call governance model or kind of due diligence framework for investors, and they could be retail investors like me and you in the future as well, who need to distinguish the high quality projects that have good levels of governance and real teams and real products and a proper track record and a good future business model from a lot of the rubbish which has been out there, which has given some of the industry a bad name. So what we're doing is that we are going to govern and manage the whole ICO, nearly like project launch and then rollout process on behalf of different ICO projects, and then give investors access to those projects, and also in the future regulators as well, because we believe in the future the likes of the SEC is going to want specific crypto related reporting and data, and we do that right now with our existing platform for Gecko governance, and we will do that in the future as this industry grows up and becomes more like a normal investment, like a stock or a bond or investment fund, and regulators and auditors will want to have access to different reports. And the idea is that Crypto One acts as the central hub for these ICO projects, right from their pre-planning when they're only thinking about launching and pulling together a white paper, dealing with the legal side, and then when it gets into much more detailed planning around investors and marketing and AML, KYC. And then when the tokens are distributed and put on an exchange, and then also long-term governance once the funds are raised and they have to be spent. And the investors obviously want to know, like, where's our money gone? How is it being governed? And please give us regular updates. We kind of feel there's no standard governance model in place to bring a high level of good practice to manage those processes. So what we are doing is that in countries that have rules for ICO and crypto projects, like, for example, Gibraltar and Malta and Singapore and Australia, we're pulling in those rules into our new platform, and we will force the ICO projects to complete them before they can go live. So that's to give investors assurance that this is being done properly, and they'll be able to have free access and be able to look into their at the various projects that they're monitoring to make sure they're being governed properly, and they'll also see any red flags if something is missed or not complied with. And similarly, in countries like the US, for example, or even here in Ireland or in the UK, there's some big countries that have no real crypto rules yet. So what we're doing in that case is we're working with a really interesting non-profit called the ICO Governance Foundation. And I'd recommend if anybody wants to have a really good read of, again, non-profit, it's a trade white paper that recommends what ICO best practice and crypto transparency should look like, and has about 40 key recommendations that every ICO project should complete. So what we're doing is in countries like the US or Canada where there's no clear crypto rules, we're using those best practice rules and pulling them into our system. We're making our ICO projects follow those processes. And if they do, and this is kind of crucial, we'll give them a Gecko stamp of approval, or what they call attestation, which basically, it's like, I suppose, in a way, maybe you might get an auditor's stamp, or an ICO, or an ISO certification, so that investors can be assured that the projects coming through our platform are of a high quality, and that we are oversighting all the due diligence and compliance to make sure that they complete all of the checks at each stage of their ICO that they say they will.
No, that's fabulous. Again, right there really is not a true governance model, and governance is probably one of the number one reasons why such a high percentage of companies that are doing ICOs will fail within the first 2 years. right?
Definitely agree.
In some cases, right, we're giving, $25-30 million to sometimes some kids, right, in the early 20s who don't have 20 years of business scars like me and you to to run their companies.
That's so true.
Yeah, and that's really the difference, right? When we'll look at a market like this compared to a traditional market with VCs, when you're using a VC firm, obviously like you're getting capital, but a lot of times you're getting mentorship. Right?
Exactly.
In the ICO space, that mentorship is missing, and the quote unquote ICO advisor is typically nothing but a face on a website 90% of the time.
Sure.
So, I agree. So if people can come through the model, right, and look at your platform for a actual roadmap, execution, and milestone planning as well, that would help several different organizations in this space, in their fundraising efforts, post ICO for management, which is going to be one of the major issues.
Absolutely. And post ICO governance, just like you said there, Matthew, they take your money's been taken, and then where there's no really structured way for you to be updated as an investor, even if it's bad news, even if the team was screwed up, I still want to know. There needs to be a way to force regular updates and advice, reports to maybe a foundation, investors, regulators, auditors, and that's exactly what we are going to impose on ICO projects as part of our governance process.
I mean, the implementation here with Reg-Tech in this space, it could have some real, could make a giant splash. I'm really kind of curious in what you think this impact would have on the industry.
Well, it's so funny. We've been doing a lot of conferences the last 3 months. All the big ones like Consensus and over in LA for Crypto Invest, and we were in Singapore 2 weeks ago. And you meet people who have got very varying views about, well, what's the role of regulation in this place? Why do you need regulation around crypto and ICOs? It's only gonna stop innovation. But really, just like what you said a second ago, Matthew, in 2 decades of being in the industry, I've seen new areas of financial innovation and investments kind of come along, be they derivatives or securitization or ETFs. And normally there's an initial period of excitement and maybe a bit of a bubble, but then eventually the regulatory hammer, the hammer of compliance comes down on the industry. And they're made put on a straitjacket with much more tighter rules. And I went through that process in 2008 when I had my consultancy. And, at the time, hedge funds complained bitterly about this horrible regulation. But in actual fact, what it did and what it will do in crypto longer term is that once that transition period of kind of growing up from a niche investment area into a much better governed, legitimate, investment area, in actual fact, then the industry has a much better chance of growing as an ecosystem and has a much more sustainable growth path, if you like. If it becomes, as I believe the SEC will eventually treat it, just like another investment area, I think that is a much more solid, profitable, and also sustainable long-term kind of growth plan. I meet so many crypto investors and they're saying, no, I don't mind. I know my risk when I put my money in. But I'm like, guys, but if crypto as a space is to become, as mainstream as bonds or equities or, 401k funds, it needs to be a place not just where you'll put your money, but where you'd advise your mom and your pop to put their money, and I'm sure most crypto investors would probably not be screaming at them to put their funds into an ICO right now,
No, I totally agree. So I'm along the same lines of thought with you in regards for, actually wanting that regulatory framework, right? There's a real case in point to be made. For example, on one of my projects, right, we're in Bermuda, and we'll probably be one of the first ones coming out of Bermuda because they have a regulatory framework that's live and active and so forth. So it's the same type thing that I'm looking for. Again, right, just it gets that same stamp of approval, like you mentioned earlier, where it's gone through a true regulatory process and it's been reviewed by several individuals and members of the government and so forth. So again, that definitely means something when you can do that.
It does. And I was going to say, we actually, because we're launching a governance solution for ICOs and we're doing our own ICO, of course, we had to practice what we preach, So as you have to, you have to live it if you're talking about it and you really are passionate about it. So we went through our own 5 months long approval process out of the Isle of Man here in Europe, and they have a cryptocurrency regime, but they really treat you as if you're setting up as nearly a fund manager. Like it's the same process you would go through if you were setting up like a financial institution. So we got the license at the end of And as I said, it took an awful long time. It was very detailed due diligence on me and on the company and referenceable, real clients, a real team, real global offices. But it was absolutely worthwhile because it really gave us a lot of knowledge as to the level of governance that's required from a regulatory perspective. And at the same time, as you mentioned with Bermuda, it's one of maybe only half a dozen or 7 or 8 real countries that you can actually go to and have a regulatory license, which obviously makes larger investors much more comfortable in terms of how you're being governed yourself. Exactly.
Speaking of the business side of thing that you mentioned, can you describe maybe a little bit about the revenue model for you guys?
Absolutely. So for Crypto One, for our new ICO governance solution, basically how that's going to work, and one of the reasons we feel that would be attractive for investors, is that ICO projects will pay us a setup fee in Gecko tokens, which will be the equivalent of $15,000 for us to manage their whole ICO and compliance process through our solution. And then they'll pay us in Gecko tokens the equivalent of $3,000 a month for a year. So that's approximately about $50,000 per ICO in Gecko tokens. And the key thing is that as we receive those tokens, we are going to be burning them. So there should be less in circulation in terms of supply. But also one key point that I haven't mentioned yet as well, which is a really key part of the revenue model, is that we have been working very closely with some of the leading, what I would call service providers to the industry, to come onto our platform. In other words, great companies that have technology, AML, even PR, legal exchanges. So big companies like Securitize and Waxman, Onfido, T0, that we're all working with. And the idea is that we give them access through our platform through the ICO projects that follow our rules. So that essentially the ICO projects have 2 kind of incentives to follow the Gecko kind of code of conduct, if you like, in terms of governance. Both access to high quality investors who are on the platform, but then also access to the leading service providers who can help them grow their business. The real kind of world class technology, PR, exchanges, etc. So those guys will receive payment on the Gecko platform in Gecko tokens as well. So we feel that will push up demand for the tokens because they'll be receiving payment on there. So it's really the idea with Crypto One is to have a centralized hub where the ICO projects can manage their projects. The investors can have clear oversight at every stage of the process to what's happening. Regulators can have kind of permissioned access to specific reports that they might request. And then all these service providers in the industry can offer their services to those projects as they're implementing and rolling out over the life cycle of their ICO. Because we personally have been going through this whole process with our own ICO for the last 6 months. And in actual fact, it's kind of like 7 or 8 mini projects. So we're doing like we're doing like a little digital marketing plan project project. We're doing a technology project with Securitize. We have a VC project with our investors. We've got 2 legal projects because we're registered with the SEC. There's a whole load of mini projects. And if we had this full solution live right now, which is coming in Q4, we would be top of the queue to use it because it would have streamlined a lot of spreadsheets and different, project management solutions that we're using with different partners.
No, I understand totally, right? So when I look at an ICO, it's basically running it. You're basically launching another business, which is the ICO, while you're also launching your real business, which you're using ICO to fund.
That's so true. And actually,
that's the way I look at it, at least, right?
That's what it is. And we have an existing business. Don't forget, we're onboarding right now Australia's largest fund manager who manage 140 billion out of Sydney, and that's happening right now about 12 time zones away from me. With our existing Gecko governance business, with our team globally, at the same time, obviously raising money through our ICO and building our new products simultaneously. So certainly very interesting time.
Obviously, it sounds like you guys have quite the offering coming. But I would love to know maybe a little bit, what do you think might be the company's biggest threat in the market?
So, to be honest, one of the things that really worries me is if you look at, if you look at the headlines, that $9 million a day is going missing, either through bad actors or, scam ICOs. That is simply not sustainable. Again, I've seen it again going back a decade ago when there were multiple hedge fund scandals, and eventually a point comes when the regulators say enough is enough, and they come in. And what concerns me is that the level of, and I'm hoping this won't happen, but the level of compliance and governance which is imposed can sometimes really, if it's too much, and again, I'm all for good governance and sensible compliance, but I've seen in the hedge fund industry where the rules were so costly to comply with after 2008, and they were so expensive with Dodd-Frank in America, that in actual fact, the industry grew in the future, as I mentioned, but there was actually less players, so that you end up with kind of big titans, the Black Rocks of the world, and a lot of the smaller players were bought up just because they couldn't afford a compliance team of 10 people. So there's a balance that has to kind of be struck to have a healthy ecosystem. So from our perspective, I mean, in our new Crypto One project, we want to have a healthy flow of good governance and well maintained and also attractive ICO projects that we can help manage, nurture, and comply, and then and launch. But at the same time, if it's a thing that the regulation is so onerous in the future, depending on where the ball eventually lands, that instead we may end up with a smaller number of realistic ICOs, though the likes of the Telegram or the Polymath size, the over 100 million or over 1 billion, and the smaller players, the likes of the guys who are raising 10, 15, 20, 30 million, which is an incredible opportunity for capital formation for small companies like ourselves, but that if it costs 5 million to launch an ICO as opposed to maybe 1 million, that's not going to really be possible as an opportunity to move into the space. And of course, then that would, from our Crypto One platform perspective, that would obviously negatively impact the growth opportunity there. So fingers crossed that happy medium, in terms of compliance will come out. And certainly I am encouraged in that, we've met the SEC here in Ireland, we've met the Irish Central Bank. In Singapore, we've met the regulator there, and in Australia. And, there is consumer protection is absolutely at the forefront of what they want in terms of, protecting the likes of me and you from being scammed. But at the same time, I have been encouraged that overall the feedback is that they understand this is a very new and innovative and interesting area for capital formation. And most of even the widely reported subpoenas, etc., that we've seen in America, I think were mainly more information gathering to understand the market better and to have a fuller view of where things currently are, and a clearer picture of the landscape. And we're really hoping that will translate into sensible kind of cryptocurrency principles. So I think a big one to watch out for, Matthew, is the G20's cryptocurrency principles report, which was due out this month, but I think here in Europe, Europe tends to close down in August. It would probably be in September. And that is where the G20 summit in March asked for a report of key principles to come out, which could be implemented in the US and Canada and all those big G20 countries. And an organization called IOSCO, who are a securities organization, and also the Financial Action Task Force, who kind of globally coordinate anti-terrorist money laundering and stuff like different AML rules. They're working together on that at the moment, and we believe that where we will see proper rules come out in the US and here in Europe will be on the back of that global framework report. Certainly the European Union here, that governs the 28 countries in Europe, is waiting for that then to put in place more specific rules around compliance and regulation for crypto and ICOs.
Yeah, it'll be interesting what comes out of that report. Even at this point, they can look at some of the sandboxes, right, that have been, we call them sandboxes, such as a Malta or Bermuda and so forth, that are trying to work in the space right now. Anyway, same as Isle of Man.
That's right. We've been involved in a couple of sandboxes, like in the UK. We've been speaking to the guys in Australia and Singapore as well. So, and they're a very useful way of starting to build up that rapport and interaction with the regulator.
Absolutely. Now, we obviously we talked about you guys leveraging blockchain in the project. So can you maybe just describe how you guys are using the blockchain?
Sure. So with our existing solution, Gecko Governance, so the product we've had in the market for a few years now, what we did was we worked with Hyperledger's Fabric application, which is big IBM and also Linux open source technology, and there have been, it's the likes of the Federal Reserve in Boston actually, and even the Bank of England use it as well. How we have utilized that to date has been a little bit different. We have focused on allowing financial services companies to basically use the blockchain timestamp and each of the blocks essentially to act as a way of recording activity. So not to transfer money or value in terms of Ethereum or Bitcoin, but instead instead to record and transfer and manage and monitor documents and data and files, which is very important in the compliance process. If I'm bringing on, Matthew here you're putting 100 million into my hedge fund, and we want to see where is the money from originally, and did I get your passport, and did I speak to your lawyer, and not only did I do an AML check on you, but did I do it in the right process and the right the right kind of implementation. So similarly, if you're launching a fund, for example, it's very important to have all those different participants in place. So your bank, your lawyers, your auditors, and we can set each of them up as a node in our blockchain. So essentially, JP Morgan could be your custodian bank; they could become a node. KPMG will be your auditors, and they will then all have permissions access on our private blockchain to see and be updated for the specific process of launching your new crypto investment fund. So we're also applying that into our new Crypto One solution, but the difference is for our ICO product, we've been working with Securitize to build out our Gecko ERC20 token on the Ethereum blockchain. Because the big difference is obviously on Crypto One is that clients will be actually giving us and redeeming and utilizing it at the Gecko token as an ERC20 token. So that is a kind of expansion of our blockchain technology to date.
Okay, cool. Well, that sounds interesting, man. Obviously, you're right. You have two use cases, right? The existing business, and obviously the new Gecko One solution that we're talking about as well.
That's exactly it, Matthew. And really, the aim we're looking in a way because you see so many ICO projects, and they might have some some interesting ideas, but to have referenceable clients, we've probably got 100 years of compliance we were working at the other day experience across the whole team, and to be with the office in Sydney to cover Asia, here in Ireland to cover Europe, and in New York to cover the North American market. It means we've got good kind of global coverage in place, and we found that as well. It's funny you mentioned about mentors and support. Our VC have been really great on that in terms of thinking about the future market and how we can best serve that. And we're very lucky in that our advisors, thankfully, have been really interactive and really helpful as well. And that's been great. We just recently brought on Trevor Coverco from Polymath, and Aaron McDonald from Centrality. And Dan Viola, one of our existing advisors, is actually an ex-SEC senior compliance examiner. So we've had a really good mix of advisors from both the crypto and also the compliance and financial services industry to help us think really critically about how to build a world-class solution and really give crypto investors for the first time the same level of transparency and accountability for their money that traditional fund managers have, like Fidelity. And that's why we feel that the industry is going to grow and attract that kind of more mainstream money from the sidelines. It needs to have the same, traditional mainstream levels of compliance and governance and the solutions to help manage them.
No, I get it. Absolutely. I think it's fabulous what you guys got going on. In regards for your ICO, is it currently live now? Is it opening soon? Can you share some details about that?
Absolutely. We just launched our pre-sale our private pre-sale about 2 weeks ago. And if anybody wants to go on to our website, which is Gecko Token Sale, so we wanted to keep it pretty straightforward. So we just Gecko Token Sale, and you can see you can whitelist with us there. We are doing a private round at the moment, and then a wider sale at the end of August. And similarly, by all means, check out our existing Gecko Governance website, which is our existing business. And if any of your listeners are ever in New York, here in Ireland, or in Sydney, and want to drop by our offices and have a cup of coffee or a Guinness if it's here in Ireland, we would love to host you.
I'll probably drop by myself.
Well, we would love to have you, Matthew. You're welcome anytime. And the Guinness is on us.
Well, Shane, again, so just so everyone knows, it's Gecko, Gecko, governance.com is the existing business, and geckotokensale.com, correct?
That's right. That's it exactly. Thank you so much, Matthew.
Perfect. Shane, again, pleasure to have you on the show today. It was a treat to chat with you again. I know it's been several months since the last time we spoke, and it's exciting to hear the progress that you guys are making.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
You too. Thanks, everybody. Again, Matthew Lockren with Crypto on the Block. Until next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Crypto on the Block radio show with Matthew Lockren. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. Tune in next time.